Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever this show is presented. This is Mark Zubrek from the Topics of the Town News, and this is a special presentation of the candidates that are running for the State Representative's Office for the 13th District in the state of Massachusetts. The 13th District represents Danvers, West Peabody, and portions of Middleton. I want to introduce Mr. Jason Guida, who is being interviewed by me at the John George Park and the waterfront at that location. He was very well prepared, and I want to make sure that you have a ability to see the interview and present himself to you as the candidate. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is a on-location filming of an interview for Jason Guida, who's a candidate for our State House Representative position, which is he's going to fill the position for Ted Spiliotis. Thank you very much. And Mr. Guida, what I'm interested in is I'd like to get a brief autobiography or a statement from you on how have you been driven to become a candidate for this position.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for having me today. So a little bit about myself. I grew up in Danvers. I'm a graduate of Danvers High School. I've lived in Danvers almost all of my life. I have a great deal of experience working in government. I've worked in all three branches of government. The state senate, I was a prosecutor, and I was a director of a government bureau. I'm an attorney in private practice now. I have the opportunity to put my experience to work for the residents and constituents of the 13th Essex District. It's something where it helps me serve our community. It's something that I've been doing for a long time throughout my career.
Thank you, Jason. This is very important for our public to know who you are, what you are, and where are you going. So my next question that I've been asking all the other candidates is, when elected, what is the first piece of legislation you plan to file?
Sure. A good friend of mine and a resident of Danvers, his family went through a tragedy many years ago. He had a young son by the name of JJ, who I had an opportunity to coach in flag football. I got to know the little boy JJ and the family really well. JJ died tragically in his sleep a couple of years ago. The family asked me if I was elected, would I sponsor a bill that they have been advocating for a long time, which would require insurance to cover screenings for heart issues as well as concussion issues. And it's something that I feel as a state representative, I think that's a very important piece of legislation. It's something that really helps residents in our district. It's something that I see the role of the state representative as advocating for these types of issues.
Mr. Guida, the next question is basically by our viewers that we have had on the show. And the issues that are coming up is, how do you plan to identify and pursue the Danvers issues? One of them has been the state taxes and fees that they are charging. How will you save money for the town of Danvers?
So I want to first talk about taxes, I believe at this time, based on the fact that we have so many people unemployed, so many people underemployed, people are having their hours cut back, people are having trouble just making ends meet. Taxes are not right for the district right now. As far as other support for our district, one of the main issues or core of my candidacy is that the role of the state representative is really to support our local elected officials and the decisions that they ultimately make. Our board of selectmen, our city councilors, they are the ones that impact our day-to-day lives the most. And our state representative, his role or her role is to support the decisions that they make.
Well, thank you. The next item on this Danvers issues is local aid. During this past few years, we've had local aid that has been pretty stable according to what the current legislator has been presenting to us. The main items on local aid is with these conditions that are going on right now with COVID-19, how can you improve or assure that Danvers gets their fair share of local aid?
You bet. So local aid is largely formulaic. It's based on a formula that's set by regulation and statute. And that's why it's generally going to stay pretty static or increase or decrease depending on the calculations. One of the things that I am focused on is something that happened several years ago, was the legislature attempting to dip into lottery revenue. Many of us know when you purchase a lottery ticket, the advertising in that lottery ticket talks about supporting our 351 cities and towns. That's what that money is for. That's what it's advertised for. I would oppose any attempt by the legislature to dip into that money to pay for other expenses. That's money that is slated and earmarked for our cities and towns, and I believe it needs to go to our cities and towns.
Thank you. The other issues that are, being talked about is high real estate taxes in Danvers specifically. What can you assist as a legislator to confine the growth of the real estate taxes, because we're maxed out right now?
Sure. So again, and I believe that the role of the state representative is really to support our local elected officials and the decisions that they make. I understand that taxes are difficult, and that's certainly set at the local level. From a state representative standpoint, our relationship with the town and our ability to work with our local board of selectmen includes the ability to try to encourage new businesses and business growth, and commercial businesses and new commercial businesses can help support our tax base and help reduce the burden on our residents in the town.
We're already have classification in our town where businesses pay, I think it's 42% more than the residential, but still the residentials, especially the elderly and the young families, are being asked to pay an unfair share of the real estate taxes.
Sure. And I understand that, and again, ultimately those rates are set by our local elected officials, not our state officials. And our state officials' job is to work with our local elected officials, support them with state resources to try to help ease those tax burdens.
Great. The next question is related to what you just mentioned, is state grants. Recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've had state grants for the railroad station. Another one that has been advertised as $1 million grant for the Endicott Park barn. And the railroad station grant disappeared. Now we are looking at the Endicott Park barn, and it sounds like it's going to disappear as well. What can we do to improve that by your being elected to the office?
Right. Again, I have to emphasize that those decisions are made by our local board of selectmen. How to spend that money, our local government. And I believe that as a state representative, my job is to look for state resources, help the town find other grants, other sources of funding, and assist with that process. But ultimately, the town and the local electeds need to decide how best that money should be spent, where it should be spent, when it should be spent. That is their job. My job is to help support those decisions.
Well, Mr. Guida, the next question is relevant to the current position that the town, the state, and the federal government is in. What we are led to believe is that Governor Baker, what is your position on his actions? Where does he get his legitimacy to dictate home confinement or masks or police immunity?
Sure.
So if you could address those one by one, I would appreciate it.
Sure. So, first and foremost, and I know there's a lot of criticism towards the governor, and I've been an attorney on a case where we challenged one of his orders successfully in federal court. And certainly there's room for criticism there. But in general, I would think that it's reasonable to say that he was faced with an unprecedented challenge, and he's remained calm and addressed the challenge to the best of his abilities. But there's certainly room for questions, and there's certainly room for debate about the decisions that he's made. The core of the powers that the governor is exercising comes from a Civil Defense Act from 1950. That was a law that was crafted really in response to the Cold War and potential for a nuclear war or some other type of ground war. And it really gave broad-ranging powers to the executive branch to act in the state of an emergency. I think now, given almost 70 years later, it may be time to revisit this act and see what we can do to make it better, make it stronger, and quite frankly add some checks and balances perhaps to the process. Certainly we need an executive who's able to act quickly in a state of an emergency, but it can't be a blank check and it can't be open-ended. At some point there needs to be conversations about the decisions that are being made.
Thank you. The issues that have been coming up are delegated basically to the legality of the actions of the governor and what has the legislation or legislative actions that are needed to improve or protect the public from the dictatorship of the governor.
So, again, I think the only way to address that Civil Defense Act from 1950 is to really address it in the next legislative session through legislative hearings to really figure out what can we do better. It's easy in hindsight to criticize, but what can we do better? How do we add checks and balances? One of the things that's come up in talking to local business owners is that our local boards of health have the power to enforce the act at a local level, but they don't have the power to make decisions as to what businesses can open under what plans and how. That may be something where we could have more local control with our local boards of health making decisions that ultimately affect our small business owners in this time of crisis.
Okay, with the state unemployment rate of roughly 17% and the national unemployment rate of 10.2, I believe is the last number, what would you see that as being caused by the governor's actions, or is it because the federal actions?
I think it's a combination of both. I think, but also the fact that there is a legitimate concern about viruses, and it's just not really, there's no plan in place that was in place before this happened. So I think, again, the more time that passes, the more we have the ability to understand the virus, understand the response, and understand the proper protocols to address it. And we've slowly been able to reopen businesses, but certainly not at the capacity that we had before. And in many cases, some of those businesses have not been successful, unfortunately, in maintaining. So certainly, I think that a lot will be easier to analyze this once more time has passed and we have more information and data. But I think certainly it's a combination of federal funding and the way that it was handed out, the way that some businesses profited and others didn't, and I think also certainly kind of the quick quick shutdown of businesses without kind of a gradual approach to it certainly has hurt our economy and caused the unemployment rates that we've seen now.
Okay, the last one on this, what is your position, is I have two items. The Police Immunity Act that is being negotiated at the moment between the State House of Representatives and the Senate, and the governor has not made his views known yet.
Sure.
Hopefully he'll block it. But that's one. And the other one is also a reactionary action that's taking place in our state legislature, is the Massachusetts flag. Why do we want to erase the Indian?
So I'll start with police immunity and the qualified immunity issue and the police reform bill. I've been very vocal, outspoken throughout this campaign that the process by which this police reform bill was put together was wrong. No question it was wrong. I have experience working in the state Senate. I was the legislative budget director for the Senate Public Safety Committee back in the 2000s. I worked directly on a gang violence initiative. I was the author of a legislative report on that issue. That process took months. It had multiple public hearings. We met with stakeholders, law enforcement. We met with community groups. We met with pastors. We met with experts in the academic community. We met with police chiefs, people who understand gang violence and understood how to address it. We came up with a three-pronged plan where we addressed policing, prosecution, but certainly prevention. That, again, took months and months of work, meeting with people, and quite frankly, locking down funding to create the Witness Protection Program, to create the Shannon Grant, which provides funding for police agencies to address gang violence. In contradiction, the current police reform bill was put together overnight and rushed through the legislature at 4 in the morning, with no input from our police departments, no input from our police chiefs, no input from the officers who actually do the job. That's wrong. That is not how reform is done. You need stakeholders at the table, people who understand the business, in order to get good reform, in order to get buy-in in that reform. And I've been clear, and throughout this process, and I've been endorsed, to be clear, I've been endorsed by the Danvers Police Benevolent Association. That's a union that represents our police officers in Danvers. I've recently been endorsed by MassCop. That is a major statewide union that represents a number of police departments throughout the Commonwealth. I've been very clear that I understand the issue of reform. I understand or have heard the message on Black Lives Matter. Look, the issue here, and it's throughout the criminal justice process, is that often the criminal justice process has a disparate impact on communities of color. Absolutely, and I've seen it as a prosecutor. I've been in the court system. I've seen how the system works. I get it. I understand it. Police officers get it too. They're not against reform. But what they are against is being told how the reform should be done instead of being brought into the process and having input on how the best way to police, the best way to address these problems that we're facing throughout the nation. So that is my position on police reform. I believe that it should be tabled. I hope it doesn't come out of conference committee in any form. I think we need to go back to the drawing board in January. We need to have full legislative hearings, and we need to have real conversations about the best ways to approach this.
Did the legislative session, has it been extended?
The legislative session has been extended beyond July 31st, which is, I wouldn't say unprecedented, but certainly rare. There are a lot of issues still outstanding in the legislature, certainly the budget, but obviously a number of major reforms, including police reform, which is sitting now in a conference committee where the House and the Senate have come up with different versions, and they're trying to iron out the differences. And again, it's my hope that the conference committee ultimately can't iron out those differences, and that we can go back to the drawing board and really come up with a plan that works, not a plan that is rushed.
Great. This sounds like a reactionary plan that the both branches have done.
I have, in many times, argued that we should put policy over politics. I don't believe in drafting policy to support a one-page press release. I think that we need to take time. We need to think about the things that we do and be very pragmatic in our approach. That's the right way to legislate. That's the right way to govern.
Good. Well, the other item that I mentioned is also a reactionary act by not by the legislature. I don't think they have done that, but the mass flag. Why do we want to eliminate the Indian? Because that was our friend when the Pilgrims came on.
So I've been around this district. I've been banging on doors. I've been meeting with people. I have not had one person in this district raise this as an issue. People in this district, they care about their jobs. They care about schools and what are their kids going to be doing in the fall. They care about police reform. I've spoken with a lot of people who are very involved in either the Black Lives Matter movement, or they have family or friends, or very involved in the law enforcement community. Those are the issues they really care about, and those are the issues that I would be focused on as a state representative. I understand, and I'm willing to listen to anyone who wants to talk about a Native American on a flag, and if that's something that concerns them, I will absolutely listen. I will not, shun somebody away. But I want to be focused. I want to keep my eye on the ball, and I think the ball right now, the issue right now is getting people back to work, making sure people are safe and healthy, getting our schools working again, protecting our teachers, and supporting our law enforcement community.
Great, thank you. The other question that has been coming up is whether you need or will have a local office, and how long will this office be in existence, and who will be invited?
So, I know, and I've spoken with Representative Spiliotis, and I understand how he operated with office hours, and I've worked for a senator, and he had similar type office hours, and that seemed to work, but we also had a district office as well. So I've seen both approaches. I think I need to figure out what works best for me and works best for the district and the voters in the district. Who would be invited? Anybody who wants to talk to me. I talk to Republicans, I talk to Democrats, I talk to independents, I talk to libertarians. I don't care. I will listen to you. I may not always agree, and I respect your opinion. I may not always agree with you. Hopefully we agree on something else. But at the end of the day, everyone's invited to talk to me. Absolutely. I'm the representative of the entire district, not just the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. I am an independent, and I believe being independent means being representative of everyone in the district, not just your party interests.
Great, thank you very much. As long as you brought up the independent, there are 5 candidates for this position right now: a Democrat, a Republican, and 3 independents. how do you feel you'll challenge the voters to accept you as the best candidate?
You bet. First and foremost is my experience. I have experience working in government throughout all three branches of government, as I said before. That sets me apart certainly from a number of the candidates who have limited experience. But certainly as an independent, I think that's a really strong point that many voters in this district care about. A majority, a huge amount of voters in this district are independent voters. I meet with people who have very conservative viewpoints on some things and very progressive viewpoints on other things in the same person. So I think what our voters are looking for is somebody who's independent, who's pragmatic, who makes decisions based on facts, and who's not bound to the whims of each party. They don't play follow the leader. They don't do what the speaker says 99% of the time. They don't do what the minority leader says 99% of the time. But they make decisions based on the facts. I know, and I've worked for Republicans, I've worked for Democrats. I know that sometimes Democrats have good ideas, sometimes Republicans have good ideas. And it's important, particularly as an independent, to be able to make decisions unbound by party politics.
And just to clarify, for the upcoming primary, none of the 5 candidates for this office, for the 13th district office for the state, are up for election or on the primary on September 1.
Correct. So everyone will be on the ballot on November 3rd. There will be 5 candidates on the ballot on November 3rd, and I hope everyone who's watching chooses me.
The last and final question I'd like to just pose to you, and this is more for a statement of your candidacy. And what I've asked every candidate is, what is the purpose and depth of your candidacy for this office? Because it's a long-term commitment or short-term commitment in some cases, but you need to get to work as quickly as possible. But what is the depth of your candidacy? Is this something that you're really looking forward to?
Absolutely. So it's something that I've thought about for a long time. Since I worked in the State House in the early 2000s, since I worked up on Beacon Hill, I realized that I could really do a good job for my community and for my constituents. I've built a resume of experience working in government, getting things done. As a private attorney, I work with individuals, helping them solve problems. These are the things that I think are good, a good resume for somebody coming into the office as a state representative. Once I get there, I can hit the ground running. It's completely familiar territory for me. I've certainly been up on Beacon Hill working there, but certainly when I worked in the executive branch, I would frequently go up to the governor's office or other legislators' offices to talk about issues. And as a private attorney, I've met with legislators on behalf of clients. So this is something that I know how the building works. I understand how things are done, how the sausage is made, if you will. And I can certainly represent our constituents on day one, hitting the ground running.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jason Guida,
Thanks, sir.
our candidate, independent candidate for the position of the 13th district in the state of Massachusetts, and that represents Danvers, which is 70% of the voters, West Peabody, which is another 3,000 or 4,000, and part of Middleton. So you're in a community of Danvers, basically, that are adjoining. So thank you very much, and thank you for coming out here at John George Park. We are looking at the yacht club, and we're also facing the ball field that is well maintained, and I believe that they've been having games here, and I hope they're permitted by the governor and the town manager. Thank you very much, and good luck on your candidacy. And I hope to see you on the political trail.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you.